All right, so we'll go ahead and get started this evening with our webinar. Thank you everyone that's joining us and taking time out of your evening to participate in tonight's webinar. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jessie Jim. Donet in Schlinigi a Ashi in Schlin, Senabisli Bashin. And I'm here from the Standing Rock community, which is west of Crown Point. I am the field coordinator of the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. As many of you know, if you guys have been following our email listserv from the NAPS project, the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project builds on top of the work and accomplishments of the Native American Producers Success Project. So before we begin, and while everyone is entering and coming on, I'm going to go ahead and go over the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project in a couple of slides. And then we'll move on to Marcy's presentation on cattle pregnancy prognosis. Okay, and then at the end of the webinar, we're going to go ahead and have a poll. If you guys could fill that out at the end, that will help us for future webinars on what type of material you guys want to see. Okay, so the Navajo Sustainable Project is a New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service initiative delivered in collaboration with the Ned College Land Grant Office and the Community Outreach and Patient Empowerment Program, also known as COPE. This project is funded by the USDA's Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers program. That's our partners, and then also our funding partners. We do, similar to the NAPS project, we do have 3 goals that we want to accomplish, which you see on the screen, is to improve the operations, the profitability, and the sustainability of socially disadvantaged Navajo farmers and ranchers and veteran farmers and ranchers. Secondly, we want to increase the Navajo farmers and ranchers' knowledge of and use of USDA programs such as NRCS, FSA, rural development, and the risk management programs and services, and those of other resource providers in the area. And lastly, we want to increase the local production and consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy food by Navajo families and individuals. So we are going to accomplish these goals through a series of livestock and crop related topics, webinars, and we're wanting to get out into the field this year at least once a month. So look out for some invites on that. And if you want to be included on the email listserv, go ahead and in the chat box, send your email. And then at the end of the program tonight, we'll have our email addresses on there. And so we do the field staff, the Navajo Sustainable Agricultural field staff include myself, and then also we like to welcome aboard Kelly Lantana, who is our field specialist. So welcome, Kelly, and we're excited to have her on our team. So we'll go ahead and continue, start with tonight's webinar brought to you by Dr. Marcy Ward, who is the Livestock Extension Specialist from New Mexico State University. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the screen over to you, Marcy. If you guys have any questions, hold it to the end, and we will have a Q&A session. Marcy?
Well, thank you once again, Jesse, for the opportunity to visit with everyone, and Michael and everyone that's involved in the project. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Thumbs up. Okay. So I was asked to talk today about pregnancy diagnosis and the importance of it in beef cattle. And when you do some statistical digging, it's pretty surprising to find that within our industry across the nation, only about 17% of producers really use pregnancy diagnosis in their toolkit on a regular basis. And there are some reasons. For you folks, you're very well aware that vet availability can be a challenge. And then there's a cost. Regardless of how you do this, there is a cost, and then you have to consider labor. Some of these techniques require training, and then if you don't really have a breeding season, the pregnancy diagnosis bit is a little more challenging to manage. But that said, there's reasons. And so for tonight, we're gonna first talk about the reproductive tract of the female. I think that's important to kind of get a base foundation of that as it relates to pregnancy diagnosis, and then the gestation of the fetus in its stages. And then finally, we'll talk about the diagnosis options that are out there and how it all pays, because it does pay very much so. And I was, very surprised by that statistic that it's only 17% of people that use this, because there's so much tied to it in terms of profit and resource management. It's just a really important tool to utilize. And then conversely, we'll talk about the cost of not preg checking. So real quick, Repro 101, reproductive anatomy of the beef cow is fairly complex in it, not only in its structure, but what it does and in its functions. And of course, we have the ovaries here. We have the oviduct. It's a little hard to see in this image. It trails into the uterus, the uterine horns. These play a very vital role when you're doing pregnancy diagnosis. If you're going to do palpation, being able to find these benchmarks and kind of figure out how much fluid's in the horns, to see how far along she might be, because this is where the calf is housed for 9 months. And this whole area just fills with fluid and calf and all that. This is the birthing canal, the cervix, and it also provides protection for the calf. There creates a mucus plug that prevents external contaminants from entering the womb. And then certainly this is where the calf exits, okay? So one thing I think people don't really think about is the interaction between the brain and the role it plays in talking to the reproductive system and then back and forth. They talk to each other quite a little in the form of hormone exchange. And what hormones are meant to do is to create a response or to stop a response. That is basically the role of any hormone in the body. But for reproductive purposes, it does start at the brain, and then conversely, they talk back and forth to each other. So specifically for reproductive regulation, it's in the hypothalamus, which is in the center part of the brain here. And then just under the hypothalamus is a structure called the pituitary gland, and that's what this is here. And what I find interesting is, regardless of male or female, the hormones released from the brain functionally they're named the same in both the male and the female, and they do the same thing. And that's gonad manipulation, okay, production, growth, and that. And so, so that is the primary role of the brain. So don't get worried about this graph. There's a lot of arrows pointing up and down and negatives and pluses. And this just shows the intricacy of the system and how they interact with each other. This particular picture just shows a non-pregnant animal and what happens. But then the fetus also comes into play once pregnancy is established, and it starts talking to the brain as well to say, hey, I'm here, don't kill me off. And so that interaction is ongoing through gestation. So what this communication ultimately does is create what we know as the estrus cycle. And basically what this is a change in levels of various hormones. And then these circles are structures of the follicle where the egg is housed. And then ultimately, I gotta minimize that. Ultimately, we go for what we're shooting for pregnancy is ovulation, a successful ovulation. During the last 7 days of this 28-day cycle is when that typically takes place. The cow is receptive to breeding, and that is because an egg has been released through this hormone cascade. So from a physical standpoint, the egg is released from the ovary, and in this, what I call the catcher's mitt is called the infundibulum. This is at the base, and it's these finger-like structures. The egg is expelled, and these finger-like structures capture it, and it travels down the oviduct or the fallopian tube. Either terminology is fine. And then about halfway down in the region we call the ampulla is where fertilization takes place. So the sperm have to travel successfully up, and the egg travels successfully down, and fertilization hopefully happens. And then once that takes place, it takes 6 days approximately for the egg to travel until it reaches the uterus. Here's the horn of the uterus. Excuse me. And during this part, the egg is relatively protected, okay? So for people that have ever been involved in artificial insemination, there's a big debate of, if you breed them, when can you move them? Should you move them? And really, we've found that, say you take them to a facility to be bred, it's okay to haul them out the next day because you're buying yourself a little bit of time. Once it enters the uterus, it is fairly vulnerable, and I'll show as to why here in this next picture. So here's the very beginning of gestation, okay? So day 1, it's traveling down the fallopian tube or the oviduct, and then here it's continuing to add cell layers, and it's quote unquote hatching until it creates what we call a trophoblast. And this germ disc is what's ultimately going to turn into the fetus. Okay, so again, this is, we're about 2 weeks out from the actual breeding event. And at this point, this is when the fetus or the embryo is the most vulnerable. Okay, so 6 days safe in the oviduct. Now we're running just pretty much loose and free in the uterus, being bounced around. And this is where what we have called early embryonic loss typically takes place, because any type of stressor, change of nutrition, transport, this kind of thing, because it is yet to attach and develop a placenta, it's really vulnerable to be lost or to die. And so it's really particular that you don't shake the boat too much during this window before this the interaction between the embryo, okay, when it hits this epiblast phase, it starts to talk to the uterus / the brain, and this prevents the cow from going into another cycle. It's now gearing up to maintain a pregnancy. And so again, even though he hasn't attached to the uterine wall yet, and he's still pretty vulnerable, pregnancy recognition happens about 3 weeks after actual fertilization, okay? So you can see here, about 3 weeks in, it's developing even further, elongating. Attachment has now taken place, so we have a home to park. And then from then on, this continued development of the vascular side of things. These are called, we have the umbilicus here. You know, the umbilical cord is what we always associate with nutrient transfer, but in reality, it's a network of vessels from the cow to the fetus and back into the cow that's called the placentum. So when a cow calves and then she expels her after birth, you'll see those round buttons. So it works like a Velcro system, and the buttons are part of the calf called the cotyledons, and they have, I hope you can see me because I can't see myself. So they sort of, you know, disattach or unattach from the uterine wall in a very much like a Velcro way, but they stay with the placenta. And so those are those buttons that you see, okay? Very important component for good fetal development and growth. So this is a very rough cartoon and very simplistic cartoon, but it gives you an idea of what that calf might look like at various stages of pregnancy. And so again, that embryo is basically this disc that continues to grow and build cells and cell structures. But what's amazing about gestation is how different tissues start to differentiate into different organs, into skin, into bone, into brain. And that all is starting well off by day 60. And if you were to look at an ultrasound image, this calf, or a physical image, he is only about the size of a silver dollar, okay? Not very big. They continues to grow and develop its limbs, and by day 60, you can even determine sex. And then by 6 months, you see the calf pretty well fully formed. He's not fully developed, but he's fully formed. And then this is the end product here after the 283-day gestation. So when I talk about organ development and building the heart, you can detect, this is what I love about ultrasound, is you can see the heartbeat at around 30 days. It's just a flutter, but you can determine if the embryo is viable or the fetus is viable as early as 30 days, okay? So some of these organs are already taking place very early on in gestation, and you can determine if it's a viable or healthy embryo or / fetus pretty early on. So once implantation takes place and there's nutrients being brought into the calf, this happens fairly quickly. The development of these organs for it to survive has to happen early on. And then we have kind of halfway through gestation, what we call maximum fetal growth at the rate. Everything just sort of expands at an exponential rate. So from a practical term, you always hear about, well, you got to start feeding the cows more in that last gestation. And the reason is we were wanting to keep up with the growth rate of that calf. And so it's really important because they're putting down muscle, they're putting down bone, they're putting, you know, their organs are growing. All of that requires additional vitamins, minerals, and protein and energy to get that done. And the only way they can get that done is if it's provided to the dam, okay? And then we get to parturition, birth, and then this is the rest of the life cycle of that calf while he's on your ranch. Here's just another image of the different stages of what happens during fetal development. Basically, myogenesis is simply the development of muscle fibers, and then Adipogenesis is the development of fat. And that's important too, that they get what's called brown fat development. And it's very temporary for the calf, but it's extremely important because most calves, based on their breeding cycle, are born in not the best weather. Okay, so it's cold It could be wet or snowy, because guarantee you when a cold front comes in, you're going to have a birthing storm, because all the cows say we have to, have calves at the worst possible time. But what helps that calf stay alive is that brown fat that's developed over time, and it helps keep them kind of internally warm. But also you have just general fat genesis as well. That's very important. So if you were to be manually palpating an animal, this is kind of the association we make in terms of calf size based on stages of pregnancy. So like I said, that very early pregnancy, that 60-day, it's really about the size of, a silver dollar, very small size of a mouse. At 90 days, it's doubled in size. It's about the size of a rat. And then by 6 months, pretty easy to palpate these guys, because they are literally the size of a small dog. And so we'll get into, I'll show you some visuals of what that might look like. But it's this area right here that's really sometimes very difficult to manually pick up unless you have a lot of experience. So at the end, this is the ending, happy ending, hopefully for all, and you get a calf on the ground. So that's the goal ultimately, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you have pregnancy diagnosis, you can not only know that she's going to calve, but it gives you some opportunity to plan for that calving event, particularly in your heifers, right? Those heifers tend to need babysitting at times. And so if you know they're pregnant, you can help them have a successful calving season, because you have a better idea of when those calves are going to hit the ground. So price of pregnancy diagnosis, there's a cost regardless. So ultrasound, we'll talk about what that's about. And because it requires an additional piece of equipment for veterinarians, or people can purchase this equipment themselves, it's a little more expensive than just raw palpation. And then this blood test looks a little scary on the cost side, but we'll explain maybe how that can really be a good tool for anybody to use as a plan B, or just in general to have in their toolkit, that you can do it without really any training and have a result, okay? Regardless of how you do the diagnosis, bringing in a veterinarian is always recommended, realizing that that's sometimes not an option, but you have to add labor. Even if it's you and your family, you want to add labor to that cost. Even though you're not maybe giving them a paycheck at the end of the day, there still is a cost to that that should be accounted for, okay? It's more than the bologna sandwich they get at lunch or something. The other thing is feed intake and the dollars associated with that. So a lot of times when cows are just out on grass, we take for granted the fact that there is a cost to that. We do know, based on the bills we have to pay, that for supplement and mineral, those costs are pretty clear, but there's also a cost on the forage end that you want to consider. So income differences, I'm going to go through that. And then obviously the profit differences. Sorry, the dog needs out, but he will have to wait. Okay. So a lot of opportunities by using this very helpful tool. So we'll start talking about ultrasound technology first, and simply because it's one that you can detect pregnancies manually as early as 30 days after they've been exposed to a bull, and it also gives you, you will know how old that calf is. At 60 days, you can determine sex of the calf. Someone who is skilled with the technology. And if this picture down here kind of shows, the dairy industry uses this all day, every day, because it's integral part of their operation. But you can see it's very portable, or can be. And anymore, just like with any technology, it's getting a little more cost reasonable, with average for a system like this, depending on how fancy you get, $3,500 to $8,000. And you think, my goodness, that's expensive. But if you co-opt the pie, the cost of it, it's really not too bad. And then if you spread it out over cows, and what the opportunity costs of cows that you missed or didn't get diagnosed with pregnancy, it wouldn't take too long to pay that. There is some training involved because I always, when I do demonstrations and I show them images, they look at me like I've got corn in my ears because it looks like a gray screen. But there's some things you can look for, and this is always what I do, is I first look for this black. That means fluid. The more dense, whatever it be, tissue or bone, the more white or gray is portrayed. You can determine if that animal is open, meaning she's not pregnant, pretty quickly. But then, so this is about a 45-day fetus here, and this one would be closer to a 75-day fetus. And you can see he's got organs going on. Here's his leg, here's his spine, here's his head. You can really pick up structures, and it's fun to see. If anything else, if you're kind of a techie person, but it is an option out there. And then there are some veterinarians that will have this technology available to them as well. So what this gentleman has is a probe extender, I guess you could call it. And basically, you won't have to physically arm the cow, and this is easier on the cow, it's easier on the person. And he has goggles that he can see what's going on in the cow just with his goggles. So the technology is pretty amazing. Then we have what I think most everybody is familiar with in terms of pregnancy diagnosis is manual palpation. It requires a veterinarian to really be the most accurate. They do this to a lot of cows, right? Hopefully hundreds, if not thousands every year. So they've got the training, they've got the expertise. Their chances of missing a pregnancy is pretty low, and it does take practice or special training. And in New Mexico, if you want to do pregnancy diagnosis for other people and charge for that, you have to go through the Department of NMDA, and you go through a training certification process in order to be able to do this as a business. But if you want to do this on your own cows, you're more than welcome to do that once you've been trained. So like I said, though, you have to get in a lot of cows and really feel comfortable and with the structures that you're feeling, because approximately 20% of the cows that go to the sale barn are found to be, in fact, pregnant. And if you think about the opportunity cost with that pregnancy, it's an opportunity lost, okay? The other benefit to the manual palpation, along with obviously the ultrasound, is it can provide you age of calf, meaning most vets will carry a color stick with them. And they'll say it's a 1-striper, 2-striper, 3-striper. And basically what that's going to tell you is how pregnant she is. And that's important too, in terms of your production and selecting females, because the ones that breed early in the breeding season are your likely most fertile, and they're going to be the most successful in raising a really good calf. Okay. So those 3-striper cows you want to keep all day long. This is also the least expensive option of the 3. So I'm just going to give you some visuals of manual palpation and what, it's obviously 2D and cartoon and hard to tell, but basically what he's in the pelvic area of the cow. Any early bred cow or an open cow, the reproductive tract sits right up in here because there's just no fluid, there's no weight to it. However, you notice that this is a 70-day pregnancy, okay? So for someone who doesn't have a lot of training, they could easily say this is an open cow based on the size of the uterus. So you really want to feel for that fluid to be present in the ultrasound. It's very easy to pick up that fluid almost immediately because that's a very telltale sign that there's likely a pregnancy in the tract. An open tract should have very little, if no fluid at all, as long as there's no sort of infection problem. So if you look across your herd, it's the way most breeding is distributed. At least 20 to 30% of your cows breed late for whatever reason, whether that be age or body condition, or the bull never found them. So you do have a certain percentage of these cows that are going to fall into this group come fall or weaning, or whatever your rotation is, if you're spring or fall calving. And so keep that in mind, that the risk of missing these guys is fairly significant. So if you call a cow open, here's the opportunity cost, very simplistically broken out. So I checked markets from last week at Clovis, and based on a 1,100 pound cow, she's going to bring you about $770, open cow. But on average, cow costs are right in that $750 mark. That sounds high, but it's kind of an average if you're on private land versus federal or whatever. That cow cost is it just keeps ticking upward, is the take home message. So you're getting a whopping $20 maybe on that cow. Okay. So if you tested or rechecked and made sure she was in fact pregnant or open, you will get a calf out of her. You might get $840 depending on the market. And then the cow cost hasn't really changed, okay? So you make a little more money on just having a calf out of her versus shipping her down the road. And the other added benefit is you now know there's no need to replace that cow. This is where most cows fall, I guess, is in that most of these cows should be anywhere from 90 to 190 days pregnant by weaning. And it's pretty consistent if you have a 60-day breeding to 90-day breeding season. And you can see here, there's a lot more fluid, that in fact, the whole reproductive tract is starting to fall off the pelvic rim, and it will fill your hand with fluid. But that's not the end game, right? So sometimes cows get uterine infections that can fill the uterus with fluid as well. So you do still want to be able to find that calf. Good sign if you have fluid in your hand, but better sign if you can find that calf. And again, if you remember from our pictures, he's about the size of a cat. Well, no, he's about the size of a rat at this stage, between a rat and a cat, just in that window, okay? So this these guys are kind of fun to find because I do what it's called the basketball technique. So he might be hiding, the whole reproductive tract now because of the weight of that calf, and the fluid is off the pelvic rim. So you're going to have to reach a little deeper. But I do what's called the basketball technique, and just bounce gently. Okay, gently. You bounce to feel for fluid, and then see if that calf won't come to the surface. And every once in a while, he'll come and give you a high five. And so that's to know that, yes, in fact, she's very pregnant. Okay. The final thing that's really gaining in popularity is a blood test pregnancy diagnosis. And this technology has now gotten to the point that makes me happy. There's been several tests that use blood, and it's very precarious and cumbersome and time consuming to do an at-home pregnancy test. But now they've come up with technology that makes it super simple. It's very user-friendly. We're going to show you a video in a moment. It's a little bit of a commercial. We're not trying to promote one company over the other. This particular company has developed the technology, so kudos to them. But basically, these tests are highly accurate, okay? They measure what's called a pregnancy-associated glycoprotein, and this protein is generated from a placenta. Okay. So that pretty much tells you if she has a placenta, she's likely pregnant. Presence of this protein is kind of a yes-no situation. And it's fairly durable. I'm not saying that you should leave these samples out for the sun and all that and for days. They can break down, but it's a fairly durable protein to measure. And so that's why that is the particular agent that they are testing for. The samples can be sent to the lab or done chute side. It is a little cheaper to send them to the lab, but you have a longer wait. So anyway, we'll get into the details here in a minute. You do, for this procedure, you do need a little bit of extra quote unquote cow management, meaning, so the one test I'm getting ready to show you takes about 5 minutes to get a result. If you choose to keep her in the chute, that's fine. But if you have things to do, you might, want to shoot the cows into a different pen and then sort later. It's whatever suits you, whatever facilities you may have, but do plan on being able to have them manage those cows at least a day or so more, or at least a few hours more. The one drawback to the pregnancy test, if people use it, that's better than nothing, okay? Because you get a yes, no, but you don't get a stage. It's hard to find those early bred cows, okay? The ones that are really important economically, because it just tells you she's pregnant. It doesn't tell you how pregnant she is. That said, you also catch those very late breeding cows because they can detect pregnancies as early as 30 days. So she might have been the last cow to get bred during your breeding season, and you will find her. Okay, so hopefully I'm gonna stop sharing and start a video, and then because the dogs are getting ready to get in a fight, dang it. Okay, let me stop share. And I'm going to now try to see if I can find it quickly. Hold on. Nope. Give me just a minute. Oh, come on. Escape. Hold on, guys. Here, let me see if I can bring it up now. Okay. Are you gonna let me do this? Yes, okay. Can you guys see the screen with the internet?
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
I'm gonna play this video. And let me know if you can hear it okay. It's going to explain the producer's profile, but also show you how the test is taken.
Okay.
Let me know if volume's all right.
I'm Phil Trowbridge. We have Trowbridge Farms. We're located in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley. Our family started in the Angus business in 1955. We run a total operation of about 1,200 acres. And we run about 300 head of beef cattle. We have 2 annual sales. The Alertus on-farm pregnancy test for us has been unbelievable time saver, because we can do it whenever we want. We don't have to wait on anybody. In today's world, it's just the vet call itself. It's expensive. And then on an hourly rate, it becomes cost base a little high.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Phil Trowbridge. We have Trowbridge Farms. We're located in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley. Our family started in the Angus business in 1955. We run a total operation of about 1,200 acres. And we run about 300 head of beef cattle. We have 2 annual sales. The Alertus on-farm pregnancy test for us has been unbelievable time saver, because we can do it whenever we want. We don't have to wait on anybody. In today's world, it's just the vet call itself. It's expensive. And then on an hourly rate, it becomes cost base a little high. This test is going to be more affordable and faster for us. We're not a huge operation, so when we do this, our son is the kind of keeps track of all the records. So he'll whip out his notebook and we'll figure out how many cows are between, let's say, 28 and 35 days. And we'll sort those cows out in the morning. It started years ago, so we've got decades of experience at tail bleeding. But you know, when you get a cow in the chute, you want to you hold her tail up not too high where she's comfortable, and then you're going to actually feel the vertebrae, and you want to go between those discs. We do it with a vacutainer most of the time. So when you go in, then you click the tube on, and at that point, the blood it's just like a vacuum cleaner, basically. It sucks it out and fills the tube to a certain level, and then you're done at that point. You know, we've run as many as 12 or 15, and to be honest, it's so handy for us. There's days we just run one. We're interested in, you know, we bred this cow 21 days ago, never saw her eat. Alertus on farm, we've used now quite a bit. So we know how effective it is, and it's been so easy to use and very, very predictable. You know, when you're using the Alertus on farm, the lines that they have, one's a test line, one's a result line. And the result line, there's days that it's really bright red and it's so easy to see, it's no problem. And there's days, I'm 65, that I have to get our son, who's got a little better eyes, that can see a faint pink line. But if there's a faint pink line, they're pregnant. The beautiful part for us is the individual packaging. When it comes, you only have to open one. You can do one, you can do 20, you can do 50, you can do whatever you want to do. But the individual packaging really does make it effective. My favorite part about the Alertus on farm is just we can get results fast. You know, we don't have to, like I say, you don't have to schedule an appointment to get somebody to come to do your palpations for you. You know, in 20 minutes, you know whether that cow goes to pasture A, B, or C, or do some kind of repro work. That's the part we like. It's just very efficient. We sell a lot of bulls in here, and we have quite a few customers that don't pregnancy test their cows, period. And it has a lot to do with making arrangements with the veterinarian, the cost. I think you'll find this to be very effective, and we encourage people to utilize it. It's going to make you a lot of money just because of you're not going to have open cows standing there all winter looking at you, and you can do it on your time.
Okay, let me close that out. Oops. Okay. Now, I'll get back to the show. So I'm going to give you, I've done chute side demonstrations for people with this test before. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of the particulars of this based on some of the things he said and some of my experiences. But one thing I would recommend if you're doing several cows, that you assign one person to do nothing but blood tests. There is a place, if this video showed, that you can put the cow number on. And so in this picture, it shows the tube and a syringe versus the vacutainer. I personally like this method better. You go to the same location and you just draw it out with, I don't know if you can see, but you can draw it out with your finger and your thumb or your pinky and pull the blood out that way. It does take a little practice, but it's not too hard once you get the hang of it. And it shows this blood tube. It's called an EDTA, non-coagulating blood tube. And that's important that you use the purple top tubes if you're going to use the tubes. If you're in a situation where you just need to draw the blood for now and you can pen the cows off for, you know, say, oh, even overnight, put your blood in a cooler. And then maybe that evening when you get home, you can, and label the tubes very well, so you know what cow belongs to what tube. And then you later, when you're home, you can run the tests if you want. If you're wanting to do it right then and there, this is sort of a cheat that I've found works, but you have to be pretty careful. is just be very careful and put like 3 drops of blood directly from the syringe into that well right here. And the directions can show you where to put the blood and where the results come. And then there's a reagent that you do need to be pretty particular about to wash that blood onto the reaction paper. And it takes 6 drops specific. If you go over that, that's when you get kind of a diluted result and you're not sure if you have a positive or a negative. But those are just some tips that I've learned by using this product, but I think there's a lot of potential for people that don't have rapid access or immediate access to a veterinarian. The drawback is this one test per cow is about $9. But at the end of the day, that beats, maybe, losing some profit on a pregnant cow. The other option is to send it off. You would do the same thing as you did in the chute side test in terms of blood collection. You would want to ship it in a cooler with an ice pack, preferably overnight. And then make sure the tubes are very easy to read, that there's not a lot of blood on them. But what I do just as a courtesy whenever I submit samples to the lab is I also provide a written or typed out list of animals that should be within those samples. This is the website here, and this is where it's located in Albuquerque. And they're pretty quick with the results, 2 to 3 days, depending on how busy they are. And it is cheaper. So you have your shipping, of course, but this is a cheaper version to get a blood test result. So either way, those are some really good ways to know the result of pregnant, yes, no. So why do we do it from a financial standpoint? You think, oh my gosh, it's so expensive to get him out here, the veterinarian, it costs so much with the mileage, blah, or these tests are expensive. But in reality, this is how it really breaks out. So for some people that do artificial insemination, like the gentleman in the video, they want to know pretty quickly who's the daddy. And so they will test fairly early after they've been exposed to a bull. And from this, the time reference from the cost and the forage that's consumed is from calving, okay? So say we're at early preg check, say 60 days, or say 30 to 45 days after exposure, those cows have consumed since calving 23 tons of feed. That seems like it's hard to wrap your head around, but if you assume these 10 cows that are quote unquote open out of 100 are consuming 25 to 30 pounds of forage a day, that adds up very quickly. And then the feed cost, again, there is a cost of forage. It's sometimes hard to kind of calculate, but you want to consider that. The cost of the pregnancy diagnosis on those 10 head was, about $500, or the total cost for those 100 cows, sorry. Cost of labor, and then the income from the calf, cow-calf pair is $14,000 with a net income minus your expenses of the veterinarian and the labor is $11,000 roughly. Most people do preg checking on this area. And so those 10 cows that didn't breed back, didn't give you a calf, by that time they've consumed 36 tons of forage, and their feed total, cow cost is starting to ramp up to that $425 a head type of situation. You add that cost to your pregnancy diagnosis, but you have those calves are a little heavier now. And so you're going to have a little added income from the calf and the cow. And so your net income is roughly about $1,100 or $11,000 off of those 10 cows. If you don't check and you just let those cows go, right, for whatever reason, 1 year, those 10 cows will consume 64 tons of forage. That's a lot, particularly in times of drought. that, you know, you take that for granted, and it's a precious commodity, not only forage, but water. And so their cow costs in this scenario, that's $8,500 that they've cost you with nothing in return other than if you take them to the sale barn and you get what you get. And in this scenario, I think I had 80 cents maybe, or maybe even more, 85 cents on the cow. So you'd get $8,000 from selling those open cows, I guess. But they still have the cow costs, right? So you've actually lost money on those 10 cows, not to mention the forage that they've consumed in that year window of not producing a calf. So this is where, I know this is a little bit of a muddled table, but the long and the short of it is, you know, preg checking pays, okay? So it improves your profitability of your operation. You will save forage and water, which is, you know, so challenging to maintain, particularly during drought. So you're not wasting that very precious resource on animals that are not really producing. If you do palpation, whether you bring a veterinarian in or you do take the time to learn it yourself, you identify those good cows. You identify those cows that breed early, and they're going to give you the bigger, healthier, heavier calves. And any females out of those, you want to keep any females out of those cows, because in the long run, those heifers are older at their first breeding, and consequently, they end up staying in the herd longer. So an option for people now with the chute side test, that's so great. So if you're learning to palpate or you're trying to do it on your own, and you feel pretty confident with those cows that are 150 days or longer in their gestation, and you know they're pregnant, that's fine. But if you get a question mark at all, grab a test, draw some blood, and then you can catch even the ones you're unsure of. And so it's a fail safe that I think is also a really important asset to this new technology. The other benefit, regardless of how you choose to get your cows pregnancy tested, you identify fertility problems in the herd. If you see a high incidence of open cows and you do have an established breeding season, that's step number one, and extremely important to have a breeding season. You identify fertility problems. Is this due to a disease? Trichomoniasis, lepto, vibrio, all of these that can cause abortions, BVD. You know, if you start seeing a lot of these late bred or open cows, that's a red flag that you have some sort of disease. Is it on the bull? Are we having issues with bull fertility because our cows are open? So this is a way to start at least identifying potential problems in your herd and start answering those questions. So with that, I hope that was beneficial. It's not the same as being in person, and I've done these pregnancy classes in person, and it's so much more valuable, I think, I hope. But I hope the information I gave you today at least gives you a start to think about incorporating this great tool into your yearly management plan, because I think you will find the benefits far, far outweigh the costs of the actual technology or the techniques. So with that, I will take questions.
Okay, thank you, Marcy, for your presentation. And if you guys got any questions, go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourselves and ask the questions directly, or if you're a little camera shy, go ahead and throw it in the chat box and then we can read it out. But I do have a question for you, Marcy, regarding, the in-person hands-on workshops. If our producers, if we get a good number to host a workshop, what's the likelihood of having your team come up and provide a presentation and a hands-on workshop?
I think pretty well. I don't know if do you know Steve Lucero? He's a county agent for Sandoval County.
Yes.
Okay. So him and I did one in Mora back in October, and fall is so if you're predominantly calving in the spring, weaning is when the best time it is, honestly, to do these kind of programs, or just before weaning. But him and I went out, and he would palpate the cow, and then I would draw the blood, and we would do the test, and then we let people try to draw blood, because that to me is a really good technique to know regardless, because there are times if you've got something going on in your cows and you're not sure what it is and the vet can't come out right away, they might ask for blood samples, and knowing how to do this, it's very simple. And so we would teach you that technique. In terms of the actual palpation, that is a little trickier, simply because it does require several animals and a few days to pull that off. And our view is we would love to teach the actual palpation technique. However, there's such a risk of misdiagnosis with new palpators that at least the first few years before a person really gets in some cows, it would be worth incorporating this pregnancy test as part of it. But we can we bring out reproductive tracts in these programs so people can see different stages. And most of them are early pregnancies, because like I said, those are the ones that are mostly missed. But we have actual cow reproductive tracts from cavernous that we bring out, and people can feel how much fluid is in the uterus at the different stages. We ultrasound. So yeah, it's a good day to do that, and we'd be happy to.
Okay, that's awesome. We'll get together on that. And another question, there's a lot of articles out there and talking about vaccinations, what type of vaccinations to give your heifers, live vaccine versus killed vaccine. And there's the topic of giving live vaccine to a bred heifer is, increases the probability of killing the calf. And so can you explain more on that?
So that is a true concern. So even if you have a vaccination protocol where, say, you are doing what's called a preconditioning program in the fall, where you bring your calves in and you vaccinate them, you vaccinated at branding, then you vaccinate them, say, a month before you plan to ship them, and then you put them back with mom. The vaccine you use at that point, it's real important that you find modified live vaccines that are safe for cows. Because what happens is, particularly with the vaccines that contain the IBR, which all of those respiratories have, the calf actually sheds that virus while he is learning how to build up antibodies against that particular disease. And when he sheds the virus and nurses mom or is around mom, that virus can create abortions in the cow. And so if it's labeled safe for cows, then you're fine. The technology is advanced enough in these vaccines that there's plenty of options out there that you can utilize in your heifers, in your cows, and in your calves, that you shouldn't have to worry about ill effects of losing calves in the pregnant cows. The other benefit of vaccinating your cows is there is some cross-transfer immunity of certain diseases that is provided to that calf in utero, meaning while it's developing, it's not born with just a lot of immunity, but there is some transfer from vaccine in the cow to the fetus. So keeping current with vaccines on your cows is really important.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marcy. If you guys have any questions, maybe you have it after we're done here, because I know it's 6:30 right now and everybody, your evening time is precious to you. You can send it to me or to Kelly. I'm going to turn the floor over to Kelly to close us out. And thank you again, Marcy, for your presentation. If you guys want a copy of it, go ahead and email me and I'll get you a copy, and then it'll be posted on the video anyhow. We'll post it on our Facebook page and then also on our YouTube channel. We do have a chat. Okay, just a comment from Michael. Great presentation, Marcy. So go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, well, thanks, Jesse. Well, I just want to give a big thank you, Dr. Marcy Ward, for a great presentation. A lot of great information you pointed out throughout the whole evening, from presenting the gestation period to learning the blood test pregnancy diagnosis and other important aspects that goes into cattle prognosis. Sorry, kind of choked up a little bit, but we really appreciate your time here. So thank you. If we do get any questions, we'll make sure that they're answered and everything like that. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar session. I hope you learned a lot from this session like I did. So before we go, before we let you guys go, we do have, I'm not sure if you guys see the slide, we do have another webinar session that's going to be taking place on January 25th. It's going to start at 5:30 p.m. all the way to 6:30 p.m. So this is going to cover conservation plans. The presenter is going to be James Daisy, who is located at the Crown Point BIA office. He's a natural resource rangeland management specialist. So he's going to be doing the presentation on conservation planning. If you guys are wanting to get started on one or build one, we'll send that information out to you all who signed up for our monthly newsletter. So we'll send that to you guys. We're also going to go ahead and post it on our social media platforms, so that way you guys don't miss anything. But other than that, we did link the webinar Zoom session on there, so you can go ahead and maybe screenshot it. But if not, like I said, we are going to send out information about this webinar on our Facebook page and on our email list. So you'll get it one way or another. We also, you can go ahead and go on to the next slide. Thank you. So we're also, like I said, you can reach us on a Facebook page if you want to learn more about us. We also have a YouTube channel, and we also are going to start on our monthly newsletter, so you can look out for that. Before you guys go and exit out, I believe there is going to be a poll and quiz after this session is over. So I would really appreciate your time to go ahead and take that quiz at the end of the session. It would really help us out. So thank you everyone for tuning in. So we hope to see you on the next session, and that's going to be on the 25th. Thank you, everybody.
Hello. Right. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, everyone. The poll is just 3 questions. Go ahead and answer it the best you can. If you guys have a question or you want a copy of tonight's presentation, email myself there or Kelly. And then also we would like to invite, if we do need a technology media assistant, if you guys are interested, email us and we can point you in the direction to apply. So we'll have this poll up for a couple more minutes, let everyone answer. And again, thank you. And if anything else, we're here.
I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I got a question, Dr. Ward. Thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate it up here in the northern part of Arizona. I'm interested in challenging myself about the palpation and blood tests. And the palpation part, where does a poor Indian boy like me sign up to take classes or to do tests?
Well, yeah, so the test is really easy, but it's so in that discussion we had with Jesse a little earlier, you know, if we can get together and put a day at some point up in your area, you know, everybody's welcome. And so what we do at those trainings is very similar to what I talked about, only you actually do it. So we'd get, you know, we would need to find some cows, and but we would train you on how to actually draw blood and then do the test. Depending on the availability of cows and the, you know, how agreeable the producers that provide the cattle are, you might have opportunities to get your arm in a few cows. We'll have reproductive tracts, which to me is a lot more helpful because you can see the fluid versus when you're in a cow for the first time, it's very foreign feeling. You don't know what you're feeling. It's truly more beneficial in some ways to see those reproductive tracts, those pregnant reproductive tracts, so you can kind of get an idea of what different stages of how much fluid's in this tract. So anyway, long story short, yeah, if Jesse and I get a date put together, keep an eye out for that, and we'd be glad to get you guys trained on that.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to be put on the list for that.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Leonard.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, I believe everybody has filled out the poll and everybody's got it answered. So